All right, I think we're on here. Yes. Okay. This is a video I want to do discussing the extent of the law and how it, expands from the old to the new, and just what somebody is really referring to when they're saying that they're following the law, living for the law, and I think by the presentation you'll have a pretty good understanding of where it's going, and then we'll go from there. So as the title says, there's 613. I had used a website for reference, which we're going to use. Jew FAQ. That's the title, and it's Judaism 101. And then this segment on the website I'm going to be reading from is level advanced. So this is the most advanced part of the website you can be on. And some overview before we get into it. There's some Hebrew. If the Hebrew comes up, I'm just going to walk through it. I'll find the English and go back and patch it in with the English and go from there. So this is what it breaks down as the overview before it starts. Jewish tradition teaches that there are 613 commandments. This is the list of 613 identified by Rambam. Real quick, we're going to take a side note here. Rambam is this guy named Moses ben Maimon, commonly known as Maimonides, and also referred to by the acronym Rambam, was a medieval Sephardic Jewish philosopher who became one of the most prolific and influential Torah scholars of the Middle Ages. In his time, he was also a prominent astronomer and physician. And this guy was around 1135 to 1204, so sometime back a ways. And the order and organization is my own, and I'm speaking from somebody else. So that's what they say. Here's a little bit on an overview, and it kind of breaks it down in certain segments of where the laws fit, and we'll go from there. Below is a list of the 613 Mitzvot commandments. It is based primarily on a list compiled by Rambam in the Mishneh Torah. Sorry, I can't help you. I don't know what it is. But hang on, for the presentation, I'll tell you the overviews. I don't know either. The Mitzvot Torah states a code of Jewish religious law authored by Maimonides. So it's specifically that guy Rambam's Torah deal going on here. If you want to look into it, it's the Mishneh Torah. Sorry, I can't help you more than that. But I have consulted other sources as well. As I said in the page on Halakha, Rambam's list is probably the most widely accepted list, but it is not the only one. I have no idea what the other one is. The order is my own, as are the explanations of how some rules are derived from some biblical passages. For each mitzvah, I have provided a citation to the biblical passage or passages from which it is derived, based primarily on Rambam. For commandments that can be observed today, I have also provided citations to the Shaftez Shamm's Conscious Book of Mitzvot, Conscious Book of Mitzvot, apparently only commandments that apply to Israel. Commandments that cannot be observed today primarily relate to the temple, its sacrifices and services, because the temple does not exist. That's funny they say that, but we'll just continue. And criminal procedures, because the theocratic state of Israel does not exist. And that's what they say. So we're beginning in categories and sections of how the laws are broken down. First, we're beginning with God. And for some reason, God is not spelled God. It's G-D. I don't know why they took the O out, but it seems Jewish. Anyway, so we're going to start with 1. And it says to know that God exists. This is going to be found in Exodus chapter 22 and Deuteronomy chapter 5, 6. Uh, if it doesn't have a biblical citation next to the law, I'll write it down and we'll set it aside. Not to entertain the idea that there is any God but the external, Exodus 23. Not to blaspheme, Exodus 22:27. In Christian texts, Exodus 22:28. That's funny that they say it's Christian if it's the next verse, but Old Testament. Okay. The penalty for which is death, Leviticus 24:16. Number 4, to hallow God's name, Leviticus 22:32. Not to profane God's name, Leviticus 22:32. To know that God is one, a complete unity, Deuteronomy 6:4. To love God, Deuteronomy 6:5. To fear him reverently, Deuteronomy 6:13. Not to put the word of God to the test, Deuteronomy 6:16. To imitate his good and upright ways, Deuteronomy 28:9. Okay, so the next part of law deals with the Torah. To honor the old and wise, Leviticus 19:32. To learn Torah and to teach it, Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 7. To cleave to those who know him, Deuteronomy 10:20. And then now we have something else here. The Talmud states that cleaving to scholars is equivalent to cleaving to him. So as we should understand, Talmud and Torah, completely different things. Torah would be Old Testament, God's word. Talmud is not even close. And there's two types. There's Babylonian Talmud and Jerusalem Talmud. And a lot of people use Babylonian Talmud for what they do. So just so you know that. Not to add to the commandments of the Torah, whether in the written law or in its interpretation received by tradition, Deuteronomy 13:1. Not to take away from the commandments of the Torah, Deuteronomy 13:1. Not that every person shall write a scroll of the Torah for himself, Deuteronomy 31:19. These are signs and symbol laws. So circumcise the male offspring, Genesis 17:12, Leviticus 12:3. To put tzitzit on the corners of the clothing, Numbers 15:38. I do apologize if I probably pronounced that wrong. It's I know what it is, but I'm trying to describe it. They're like beads kind of thing. They very specific place where you place them is something to do with prayer. So that much I can give you with. To bind tefillin on the head, Deuteronomy 6:8. Tefillin is probably going to go with the tzitzit. Pretty sure the tefillin is like a cube. Yeah, it's like a cube, and you put it on your head. So you put your tzitzit thing on your clothing. There's like a black band that you're going to wrap around. It appears to be your left arm. Yes, it is confirmed. It's your left arm, and then you put the tefillin on your forehead, and it's basically like a black cube. Is what that is. Okay, next. Yeah, so that's the next law. To bind tefillin on the arm, Deuteronomy 6:8. 21. To affix the mezuzah to the doorposts and gates of your house, Deuteronomy 6:9. Prayer and blessing law. To pray to God is Exodus 23:25, Deuteronomy 6:13. According to the Talmud, the word served in these verses refers to prayer. 23. To read the Shema in the morning and at night, Deuteronomy 6:7. Shema is Jewish liturgy. To recite grace after meals, Deuteronomy 8:12. And that's grace after meals. So when I grew up, we did grace before meals. So they do it after. 25. Not to lay down a stone for worship, Leviticus 26:1. Love and brotherhood. To love all human beings who are of the covenant, Leviticus 19:18. not to stand by idly when a human life is in danger, Leviticus 19:16, not to wrong anyone in speech, Leviticus 25:17, not to carry tales, Leviticus 19:16, not to cherish hatred in one's heart, Leviticus 19:17, not to take revenge, Leviticus 19:18, not to bear a grudge, Leviticus 19:18, not to put any Jew to shame, Leviticus 19:17, not to curse any other Israelite, Leviticus 19:14. By implication, if you may not curse those who cannot hear, you certainly may not curse those who can. Not to give occasion to the simple-minded to stumble on the road, Leviticus 19:14. To rebuke the sinner, Leviticus 19:17. To relieve a neighbor of his burden and help to unload his beast, Exodus 23:5. To assist in replacing the load upon a neighbor's beast, 22:4. Not to leave a beast that has fallen down beneath its burden unaided, Deuteronomy 22:4. The poor and unfortunate laws. Not to afflict an orphan or a widow, Exodus 22:21. Not to reap the entire field, Leviticus 19:9, Leviticus 23:22. To leave the unreaped corner of the field or orchard for the poor, Leviticus 19:9. Not to gather gleanings, the ears that have fallen to the ground while reaping, Leviticus 19:9. To leave the gleanings for the poor, Leviticus 19:9. Not to gather olaf, the imperfect clusters of the vineyard, Leviticus 19:10. To leave olaf, the imperfect clusters of the vineyard for the poor, Leviticus 19:10, Deuteronomy 24:21. Not to gather the parrot grapes that have fallen to the ground, Leviticus 19:10. To leave parrot the single grapes of the vineyard, I call it vineyard, for the poor, Leviticus 19:10. Not to return to take a forgotten sheaf, Deuteronomy 24:19. This applies to all fruit trees, Deuteronomy 24:20. To leave the forgotten sheaves for the poor, Deuteronomy 24:19 through 20. Not to refrain from maintaining a poor man and giving him what he needs, Deuteronomy 15:7. To give charity according to one's means, Deuteronomy 15:11. Treatment to Gentiles. To love the stranger, Deuteronomy 10:19. Not to wrong the stranger in speech, Exodus 22:20. Not to wrong the stranger in buying or selling, Exodus 22:20. Not to intermarry with Gentiles, Deuteronomy 7:3. To exact the debt of an alien, Deuteronomy 15:3. To lend to an alien at interest, Deuteronomy 23:21. Marriage, divorce, and family. To honor father and mother, to honor father and mother, Exodus 20:12. Not to smite a father or a mother, Exodus 21:15. Not to curse a father or a mother, Exodus 21:17. To reverently fear father and mother, Leviticus 19:3. To be fruitful and multiply, Genesis 1:28. That a eunuch shall not marry a daughter of Israel, 22:3 of Deuteronomy. That a mamzer shall not marry the daughter of a Jew, Deuteronomy 23:3. That an Ammonite or Moabite shall never marry the daughter of an Israelite, Deuteronomy 23:4. Not to exclude a descendant of Esau, from the community of Israel for 3 generations, Deuteronomy 23:8 through 9. Not to exclude an Egyptian from the community of Israel for 3 generations, Deuteronomy 23:8 through 9. That there shall be no harlot in Israel, that is, that there shall be no intercourse with a woman without previous marriage with a deed of marriage and formal declaration of marriage, Deuteronomy 23:18. To take a wife by kiddushin, the sacrament of marriage, Deuteronomy 24:1. That the newly married husband shall be free for 1 year to rejoice with his wife, Deuteronomy 24:5. That a bridegroom shall be exempt for a whole year from taking part in any public labor, such as military service, guarding the wall, and similar duties, Deuteronomy 24:5. Not to withhold food, clothing, or conjugal rights from a wife, Exodus 21:10. That the woman suspected of adultery shall be dealt with as prescribed in the Torah, Numbers 5:30. That one who defames his wife's honor by falsely accusing her of unchastity before marriage must live with her all his lifetime, Deuteronomy 22:19. That a man not divorce his wife concerning whom he has published an evil report about her unchastity before marriage, Deuteronomy 22:19. To divorce by a formal written document, Deuteronomy 24:1. That one who divorced his wife shall not remarry her if after the divorce she has been married to another man, Deuteronomy 24:4. That a widow whose husband died childless must not be married to anyone but her deceased husband's brother, Deuteronomy 25:5. To marry the widow of a brother who has died childless, Deuteronomy 25:5. That the widow formally release the brother-in-law if he refuses to marry her, Deuteronomy 25:7-9. Forbidden sexual relations, not to include or not to indulge in familiarities with relatives such as kissing, embracing, winking, skipping, which may lead to incest. Leviticus 18:6. Skipping, that's interesting. Not to commit incest with one's mother, Leviticus 18:7. Not to commit sodomy with one's father, Leviticus 18:7. Not to commit incest with one's father's wife, Leviticus 18:8. Not to commit incest with one's sister, Leviticus 18:9. Not to commit incest with one's father's wife's daughter, Leviticus 18:11. Not to commit incest with one's son's daughter, Leviticus 18:10. Not to commit incest with one's daughter's daughter, Leviticus 18:10. Not to commit incest with one's daughter, this is explicitly in the Torah, but is inferred from other explicit commands that would include it. Okay, so that one is one that is not, there's not a Bible verse that goes to it, but they say it's close. And not to commit incest with one's daughter. Sounds good enough to me that should be a law. Not to commit incest with one's father's sister, Leviticus 18:12. Not to commit incest with one's mother's sister, Leviticus 18:13. Not to commit incest with one's father's brother's wife, Leviticus 18:14. Not to commit sodomy with one's father's brother, Leviticus 18:14. Not to commit incest with one's son's wife, Leviticus 18:15. Not to commit incest with one's brother's wife, Leviticus 18:16. Not to commit incest with one's wife's daughter, Leviticus 18:17. Not to commit incest with one's daughter of one's wife's son, Leviticus 18:17. Not to commit incest with one's wife's sister, Leviticus 18:18. Not to have intercourse with a woman in her menstrual period, Leviticus 18:19. And that is a law. Not to have intercourse with another man's wife, Leviticus 18:20. Not to commit sodomy with a male, Leviticus 18:22. Not to have intercourse with a beast, Leviticus 18:23. That a woman should not have intercourse with a beast, Leviticus 18:23. Not to castrate the male of any species, neither a man, nor a domestic or wild beast, nor a fowl, Leviticus 22:24. Times and seasons law. So on the law on the sexual law, what we would say is no incest. That'd be the best. That the new month shall be solemnly proclaimed as holy, and the months and years shall be calculated by the Supreme Court only, Exodus 12:2. Not to travel on Shabbat outside the limits of one's place of residence, Exodus 16:29. To sanctify a Shabbat, Exodus 20:8. Not to do work on Shabbat, Exodus 20:10. To rest on Shabbat, Exodus 23:12, 34 through and verse 21. To celebrate the festivals, Exodus 23:14. To rejoice on the festivals, Deuteronomy 16:14. To appear in the sanctuary in the festival, Deuteronomy 16:16. To remove chametz on the eve of Passover, Exodus 12:15. To rest on the first day of Passover, Exodus 12:16, Leviticus 23:7. Not to do work on the first day of Passover, Exodus 12:16, Leviticus 23:6 through 7. To rest on the seventh day of Passover, Exodus 12:16, Leviticus 23:8. Not to do work on the seventh day of Passover. Exodus 12:16, Leviticus 23:8. To eat matzah on the first night of Passover, Exodus 12:18. That no chamtzits, I don't know, be in the Israelites' possession during Passover, Exodus 12:9. Not to eat any food containing champs on Passover, Exodus 12:20. Not to eat champs on Passover, Exodus 13:3. Okay, champs keeps popping up, so we're going to see what this is. Champ, I'm calling it champs. That's what it sounds like. Champs with a Z at the end. So they're leavened foods that you can't eat during Passover. That chametz shall not be seen in an Israelite's home during Passover, Exodus 13:7. To discuss the departure from Egypt on the first night of Passover, Exodus 13:8. Not to eat chametz after midday on the 14th of Nisan, Deuteronomy 16:3. To count 49 days from the time of the cutting of the omer, first sheaves of the barley harvest, Leviticus 23:15. To rest on Shabbat, Leviticus 23:21. Not to do any work on Shabbat, Leviticus 23:21. To rest on Rosh Hashanah. I miss it, but you'll know what I'm talking about. Leviticus 23:24. Not to do work on Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah. Might be Hashanah or Hashanah. I think it's Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah. That still might be it. Might not be it, but close enough. Leviticus 23:25. To hear the sound of the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. Leviticus 29:1. To fast on Yom Kippur. Leviticus 23:27. Not to eat or drink on Yom Kippur. Leviticus 23:29. Not to do any work on Yom Kippur. Leviticus 23:31. To rest on Yom Kippur. Leviticus 23:32. To rest on the first day of Sukkot. Leviticus 23:35. Might be Sukkot too. Not to do any work on the first day of Sukkot. Leviticus 23:35. To rest on the 8th day of Sukkot. Shemini Atzeret. Leviticus 23:36. Not to do work on the 8th day of Sukkot. Leviticus 23:36. To take during Sukkot a palm branch and the other 3 plants. Leviticus 23:40. To dwell in booths 7 days during Sukkot. Leviticus 23:42. Dietary laws. To examine the marks in cattle so as to distinguish the clean from the unclean. Leviticus 11:2. Not to eat the flesh of unclean beasts. Leviticus 11:4. To examine the marks in fishes so as to distinguish the clean from the unclean. Leviticus 11:9. Not to eat unclean fish. Leviticus 11:11. To examine the marks in fowl so as to distinguish the clean from the unclean. Deuteronomy 14:11. Not to eat unclean fowl. Leviticus 11:13. To examine the marks in locusts so as to distinguish the clean from the unclean. Leviticus 11:21. Not to eat a worm found in fruit. Leviticus 11:41. That's interesting. Not to eat of things that creep upon the earth. Leviticus 11:41-42. Not to eat any vermin on the earth. Leviticus 11:44. Not to eat things that swarm in the water. Leviticus 11:43. Swarm in the water. I couldn't tell what that is. Not to eat of winged insects. Deuteronomy 14:19. Not to eat the flesh of a beast that is terapha, lit torn. Exodus 22:30. Not to eat the flesh of a beast that died of itself. Deuteronomy 14:21. To slay cattle, deer, and fowl according to the laws of Shekata, Shikata. if their flesh is to be eaten, Deuteronomy 12:21. Not to eat a limb removed from a living beast, Deuteronomy 12:23. Not to slaughter an animal and its young on the same day, Leviticus 22:28. Not to take the mother bird with the young, Deuteronomy 22:6. To set the mother bird free when taking the nest, Deuteronomy 22:6-7. Not to eat the flesh of an ox that was condemned to be stoned, Exodus 21:28. Not to boil meat with milk, Exodus 23:19. Not to eat flesh with milk, Exodus 34:26. Not to eat the of the thigh vein which shrank, Genesis 32:33. Not to eat shelaviv, tallow fat, Leviticus 7:23. Not to eat blood, Leviticus 7:26. To cover the blood of an undomesticated animal and of fowl and have been killed, Leviticus 17:13. Not to eat or drink like a glutton or a drunkard, not to rebel against father or mother, Leviticus 19:26, Deuteronomy 21:20. Business practices. Not to do wrong in buying or selling, Leviticus 25:17. Not to make a loan to an Israelite on interest, Leviticus 25:37. Not to borrow on interest, Deuteronomy 23:20. Not to take part in any usurious transaction between borrower and lender, neither as a surety, nor as a witness, nor as a writer of the bond for them, Exodus 22:24. To lend to a poor person, Exodus 22:24. Not to demand from a poor man repayment of his debt when the creditor knows that he cannot pay, nor press him, Exodus 22:24. Not to take in pledge utensils used in preparing food, Deuteronomy 24:6. Not to exact a pledge from a debtor by force, Deuteronomy 24:10. Not to keep the pledge from its owner at the time when he needs it, Deuteronomy 24:12. To return a pledge to its owner, Deuteronomy 24:13. Not to take a pledge from a widow, Deuteronomy 24:17. Not to commit fraud in measuring, Leviticus 19:35. To ensure that scales and weights are correct, Leviticus 19:36. Not to possess inaccurate measures and weights, Deuteronomy 25:13-14. Employees, servants, and slaves. Not to delay payment of a hired man's wages, Leviticus 19:13. And I can't begin to tell you how many people broke that law on me. That the hired laborer shall be permitted to eat of the procedure he is reaping. Produce. Deuteronomy 23:25-26. That the hired laborer shall not take more than he can eat, Deuteronomy 23:25. That a hired laborer shall not eat produce that is not being harvested, Deuteronomy 23:26. To pay wages to the hired man at the due time, Deuteronomy 24:15. To deal judicially with the Hebrew bondman in accordance with the laws appertaining to him, Exodus 21:2-6. Not to compel the Hebrew servant to do the work of a slave, Leviticus 25:39. Grab some water here. All right, we're back at it. Not to sell a Hebrew servant as a slave, Leviticus 25:42. Not to treat a Hebrew servant rigorously, Leviticus 25:43. Not to permit a Gentile to treat harshly a Hebrew bondman sold to him, Leviticus 25:53. Not to send away a Hebrew bondman servant empty-handed when he is freed from service, Deuteronomy 15:13. To bestow liberal gifts upon the Hebrew bondman at the end of his term of service, and the same should be done to a Hebrew bondwoman, Deuteronomy 15:14. To redeem a Hebrew maidservant, Exodus 21:8. Not to sell a Hebrew maidservant to another person, Exodus 21:8. To espouse a Hebrew maidservant, Exodus 21:8-9. To keep the Canaanite slave forever, Leviticus 25:26. Not to surrender a slave who has fled to the land of Israel to his owner who lives outside Palestine. Deuteronomy 23:16. Not to wrong such a slave. Deuteronomy 23:17. Not to muzzle a beast while it is working in produce, which it can eat and enjoy. Deuteronomy 25:4. The vows, oaths, and swearing. That a man should fulfill whatever he has uttered. Deuteronomy 23:24. Not to swear needlessly. Exodus 27. Not to violate an oath or swear falsely. Leviticus 19:12. To decide in cases of annulment of vows according to the rules set forth in the Torah. Numbers 32-17. Not to break a vow. Numbers 33. To swear by his name truly. Deuteronomy 10:20. Not to delay in fulfilling vows or bringing vowed or free will offerings. Deuteronomy 23:22. One of the laws here I want to write down. There's one on health, but I gotta get it. Okay, the sabbatical and jubilee years. To let the land lie fallow in the sabbatical year. Exodus 23:11, Leviticus 25:2. To cease from tilling the land in the sabbatical year. Exodus 23:11. Not to till the ground in the sabbatical year. Leviticus 25:4. Not to do any work on the trees in the sabbatical year. Leviticus 25:4. Not to reap the aftermath that grows in the sabbatical year in the same way as it is reaped in other years. Leviticus 25:5. Not to gather the fruit of the tree in the sabbatical year in the same way as it is gathered in other years. Leviticus 25:5. To sound the ram's horn in the sabbatical year. Leviticus 25:9. To release debts in the seventh year. Deuteronomy 15:2. Not to demand return of a loan after the sabbatical year has passed. Deuteronomy 15:2. Not to refrain from taking a loan to a poor man because of the release of loan in a sabbatical year. Deuteronomy 15:9. To assemble the people to hear the Torah at the close of the seventh year. Deuteronomy 31:12. To count the years of the Jubilee by years and cycles of 7 years. I just had it. Where'd it go here? To count the years of the Jubilee by years and by the cycles of 7 years. Leviticus 25:8. Not to cultivate the soil nor to do any work on the trees in the Jubilee year. Leviticus 25:11. Not to reap the aftermath of the field that grew of itself in the Jubilee year in the same way as it is in other years. Leviticus 25:11. Not to grant the fruit of the tree in the Jubilee year in the same way as in other years. Leviticus 25:11. To grant redemption to the land in the Jubilee year. Leviticus 25:24. The court and judicial procedure. To appoint judges and officers in every community of Israel. Deuteronomy 16:18. Not to appoint as a judge a person who is not well versed in the laws of the Torah, even if he is an expert in other branches of knowledge. Deuteronomy 1:17. To adjudicate cases of purchase and sale. Leviticus 25:14. To judge cases of liability of a paid depository. Exodus 22:9. To adjudicate cases of loss for which a gratuitous borrower is liable. Exodus 22:13-14. To adjudicate cases of inheritances. Numbers 27:8-11. To judge cases of damage caused by an uncovered pit. Exodus 21:33-34. To judge cases of injuries caused by beasts. Exodus 21:35-36. To adjudicate cases of damages caused by trespasses of cattle. Exodus 22:4. to adjudicate cases of damage caused by fire. Exodus 22:5, to adjudicate cases of damage caused by a gratuitous depository. Exodus 22:6 through 7, to adjudicate other cases between a plaintiff and a defendant. Exodus 22:8, not to curse a judge. Exodus 22:27, that one who possesses evidence shall testify in court. Leviticus 5:1, not to testify falsely. Exodus 20:13, that a witness who has testified in a capital case shall not lay down the law in that particular case. Numbers 35:30, that a transgressor shall not testify. Exodus 23:1, that the court shall not accept the testimony of a close relative of the defendant in matters of capital punishment. Deuteronomy 26:16, not to hear one of the parties to a suit in the absence of the other party. Exodus 23:1, to examine witnesses thoroughly. Deuteronomy 13:15, not to decide a case on the evidence of a single witness. Deuteronomy 19:15, to give the decision according to the majority where there is a difference of opinion among the members of the Sanhedrin as to matters of the law. Exodus 32:2. Exodus 23:2. I apologize. Not to decide in capital cases according to the view of the majority when those who are for condemnation exceed by one only those who are for acquittal. Exodus 23:2, that in capital cases one who has argued for acquittal shall not later on argue for condemnation. Exodus 23:2, to treat parties in a litigation with equal impartiality. Leviticus 19:15, not to render iniquitous decisions. Leviticus 19:15, not to favor a great man when trying a case. Leviticus 19:15, not to take a bribe. Exodus 23:8, not to be afraid of a bad man when trying a case. Deuteronomy 1:17, not to be moved in trying a case by the poverty of one of the parties. Exodus 23:3, Leviticus 19:15, not to pervert the judgment of strangers or orphans. Deuteronomy 24:17, not to pervert the judgment of a sinner, a person poor in fulfillment of commandments. Exodus 23:6, not to render a decision on one's personal opinion, but only on the evidence of two witnesses who saw what actually occurred. Exodus 23:7, not to execute one's guilty of a capital offense before he has stood his trial. Numbers 35:12, to accept the rulings of every supreme court in Israel. Deuteronomy 17:11, not to rebel against the orders of the court. Deuteronomy 17:11, injuries and damages, to make a parapet for your roof. Deuteronomy 22:8, not to leave something that might cause hurt. Deuteronomy 22:8, to save the pursued even at the cost of the life of the pursuer. Deuteronomy 25:12, not to spare a pursuer, but he is to be slain before he reaches the pursued and slays the latter or uncovers his nakedness. Deuteronomy 25:12, property and property rights, not to sell a field in the land of Israel in perpetuity. Leviticus 25:23, not to change the character of the open land above the cities of the Levites or of their fields, not to sell it in perpetuity, but it may be redeemed at any time. Leviticus 25:34, that houses sold within a walled city may be redeemed within a year. Leviticus 25:29, not to remove landmarks, property boundaries. Deuteronomy 19:14, not to swear falsely in denial of another's property rights. Leviticus 19:11, not to deny falsely another's property rights. Leviticus 19:11, never to settle in the land of Egypt. Deuteronomy 17:16, not to steal personal property. Leviticus 19:11, To restore that which one took by robbery, Leviticus 5:23. To return lost property, Deuteronomy 22:1. Not to pretend not to have seen lost property to avoid the obligation to return it, Deuteronomy 22:3. Criminal laws, not to slay an innocent person, Exodus 20:13. Not to kidnap any person of Israel, Exodus 20:13. Not to rob by violence, Leviticus 19:13. Not to defraud, Leviticus 19:13. Not to covet what belongs to another, Exodus 20:14. Not to crave something that belongs to another, Deuteronomy 5:18. Not to indulge in evil thoughts and sights, Leviticus 15:39. Punishment and restitution. That the court shall pass sentence of death by decapitation with the sword, Exodus 21:20, Leviticus 26:25. That the court shall pass sentence of death by strangulation, Leviticus 20:10. That the court shall pass sentence of death by burning with fire, Leviticus 20:14. That the court shall pass sentence of death by stoning, Deuteronomy 22:24. To hang the dead body of one who has incurred that penalty, Deuteronomy 21:22. That the dead body of an executed criminal shall not remain hanging on the tree overnight, Deuteronomy 21:23. To enter the executed on the day of execution, Deuteronomy 21:23. Not to accept ransom from a murderer, Numbers 35:31. To exile one who committed accidental homicide, Numbers 35:25. To establish 6 cities of refuge for those who have committed accidental homicide, Deuteronomy 19:3. Not to accept ransom from an accidental homicide so as to relieve him from exile, Numbers 35:32. To decapitate the heifer in the manner prescribed in expiation of a murder on the road, the perpetrator of which remains undiscovered, Deuteronomy 21:4. Not to plow nor sow the rough valley in which a heifer's neck was broken, Deuteronomy 21:4. To adjudge a thief to pay compensation or in certain cases suffer death, Exodus 21:16, Exodus 21:37, Exodus 22:1. That he who inflicts a bodily injury shall pay monetary compensation, Exodus 21:18 through 19. To impose a penalty of 50 shekels upon the seducer of an unbetrothed virgin and enforce the other rules in connection with the case, Exodus 22:15 through 16. That the violator of an unbetrothed virgin shall marry her, Deuteronomy 22:28-29. That one who has raped a damsel and has then, in accordance with the law, married her may not divorce her, Deuteronomy 22:9. Not to inflict punishment on Shabbat, Exodus 35:3. To punish the wicked by the infliction of stripes, Deuteronomy 25:2. Not to exceed the statutory number of stripes laid on one who has incurred that punishment, Deuteronomy 25:3. Not to spare the offender in opposing the prescribed penalties in one who has caused damage, Deuteronomy 19:13. To do unto false witnesses as they had purposed to do to the accused, Deuteronomy 19:19. Not to punish anyone who has committed an offense under duress, Deuteronomy 22:26. Prophecy. To heed the call of every prophet in each generation, provided that he neither adds to nor takes away from the Torah, Deuteronomy 18:15. Not to prophesy falsely, Deuteronomy 18:20. Not to refrain from putting a false prophet to death, nor to be in fear of him, Deuteronomy 18:22. Idolatry, idolaters, and idolatrous practices. Not to make a graven image, neither to make it oneself, nor to have it made by others, Exodus 24. Not to make any figures for ornament, even if they are not worshipped, Exodus 20:20. Not to make idols even for others, Exodus 34:17, Leviticus 19:4. Not to use the ornament of any object of idolatrous worship, Deuteronomy 7:25. Not to make not to make use of an idol or its accessory objects, offerings, or libations, Deuteronomy 7:26. Not to drink wine of idolaters, Deuteronomy 32:38. Not to worship an idol in the way in which it is usually worshipped, Exodus 25. Not to bow down to an idol, even if that is not its mode of worship, Exodus 25. Not to prophesy in the name of an idol, Exodus 23:13, Deuteronomy 18:20. Not to hearken to one who prophesies in the name of an idol, Deuteronomy 13:4. Not to lead the children of Israel astray to idolatry, Exodus 23:13. Not to entice an Israelite to idolatry, Deuteronomy 13:12. To destroy idolatry and its apparatuses, Deuteronomy 12:2-3. Not to love the enticer to idolatry, Deuteronomy 13:9. Not to give up hating the enticer to idolatry, Deuteronomy 13:9. Not to save the enticer from capital punishment, but to stand by at his execution, Deuteronomy 13:9. A person whom he attempted to entice to idolatry shall not urge pleas for the acquittal of the enticer, Deuteronomy 13:9. A person who has attempted to entice shall not refrain from giving evidence of the enticer's guilt if he has such evidence, Deuteronomy 13:9. Not to swear by an idol to its worshippers, nor cause them to swear by it, Exodus 23:13. Not to turn one's attention to idolatry, Leviticus 19:4. Not to adopt the institutions of idolaters nor the customs, Leviticus 18:3, Leviticus 20:23. Not to pass a child through the fire of Moloch, Leviticus 18:21. Not to suffer anyone practicing witchcraft to live, Exodus 22:17. Not to practice wunin, observing times or seasons as favorable or unfavorable using astrology, Leviticus 19:26. Not to practice mashish, doing anything based on signs and portents, using charms and incantations, Leviticus 19:26. Not to consult Ovath or ghosts, Leviticus 19:31. Not to consult Yidonim or wizards, Leviticus 19:31. Not to practice Kisuf, magic using herbs, stones, and objects that people use, Leviticus 18:10. Not to practice Kesem, a general term for magical practices, Deuteronomy 18:10. Not to practice the art of a chover-chaver, casting spells over snakes and scorpions, Deuteronomy 18:10. Not to inquire of an Ob, a ghost, Deuteronomy 18:10. Not to seek the Matim, or the dead, Deuteronomy 18:10. Not to inquire of a Yidoni or a wizard, Deuteronomy 18:11. Not to remove the entire beard like the idolaters, Leviticus 19:27. Not to round the corners of the head as the idolatrous priests do, Leviticus 19:27. Not to cut oneself or make incisions in one's flesh in grief like the idolaters, Leviticus 19:28, Deuteronomy 14:1. Not to tattoo the body like the idolaters, Leviticus 19:28. Not to make a bald spot for the dead, Leviticus 14:1. Not to plant a tree for worship, Leviticus 16:21. Not to set up a pillar for worship, Deuteronomy 16:22. Not to show favor to idolaters, Deuteronomy 7:2. Not to make a covenant with the 7 Canaanite idolatrous nations, Exodus 23:32, Deuteronomy 7:2. Not to settle idolaters in our land, Exodus 23:33. To slay the inhabitants of a city that has become idolatrous and burn that city, Deuteronomy 13:16-17. Not to rebuild a city that has been laid Not to rebuild a city that has been led astray to idolatry. Deuteronomy 13:17. Not to make use of property of a city that has been so led astray. Deuteronomy 13:18. Agriculture and animal husbandry. Not to crossbreed cattle of different species. Leviticus 19:19. Not to sow different kinds of seed together in one field. Leviticus 19:19. Not to eat the fruit of a tree for 3 years from the time it was planted. Leviticus 19:23. That the fruit of the fruit-bearing trees in the 4th year of the planting shall be sacred like the second tithe and eaten in Jerusalem. Leviticus 19:24. Not to sow grain or herbs in a vineyard. Deuteronomy 22:9. Not to eat the produce of diverse seeds sown in a vineyard. Deuteronomy 22:9. Not to work with beasts of different species yoked together. Deuteronomy 22:10. Clothing. That a man shall not wear women's clothing. Deuteronomy 22:5. That a woman should not wear men's clothing. Deuteronomy 22:5. Not to wear garments made of wool and linen mixed together. Deuteronomy 22:11. The firstborn. To redeem the firstborn human male. Exodus 13:13. Exodus 34:20. Numbers 18:15. To redeem the firstling of an ass. Exodus 13:13. Exodus 34:20. To break the neck of the firstling of an ass if it is not redeemed. Exodus 13:13. Exodus 34:20. Not to redeem the firstling of a clean beast. Numbers 18:17. Kohanim and Levites. That the Kohanim shall put on priestly vestments for the service. Exodus 28:20. Excuse me. Not to tear the high Kohen's robe. Exodus 28:32. That the Kohen shall not enter the sanctuary at all times, i.e., at times when he is not performing service. Leviticus 16:2. That the ordinary Kohen shall not defile himself by contact with any dead other than immediate relatives. Leviticus 21:1-3. That the Kohanim defile themselves for their deceased relatives by attending their burial and mourn for them like other Israelites who are commanded to mourn for their relatives. Leviticus 21:3. That a Kohen who had an immersion during the day to cleanse him from his uncleanness shall not serve in the sanctuary until after sunset. Leviticus 21:6. That a Kohen shall not marry a divorced woman. Leviticus 21:7. That a Kohen shall not marry a harlot. Leviticus 21:7. Hang on, this one has something here. I'm just trying to check it here. To show honor to a Kohen and to give him precedence in all things that are holy. Leviticus 21:8. That a high Kohen shall not defile himself with any dead, even if they are relatives. Leviticus 21:11. A high Kohen shall not go under the same roof with a dead body. Leviticus 21:11. It has been learnt by tradition that a Kohen who does so violates the prohibition. Neither shall he go in, and also the prohibition, he shall not defile himself. That the high Kohen shall marry a virgin. Leviticus 21:13. That the high Kohen shall not marry a widow. Leviticus 21:14. That the high Kohen shall not cohabit with a widow, even without marriage, because he profanes her. Leviticus 21:15. That a person with a physical blemish shall not serve in the sanctuary. Leviticus 21:17. That a Kohen with a temporary blemish shall not serve thee there. Leviticus 21:21. That a person with a physical blemish shall not enter the sanctuary further than the altar. Leviticus 21:23. That a Kohen who is unclean shall not serve in the sanctuary. Leviticus 22:2-3. To send the unclean out of the camp of the Shekinah, that is, out of the sanctuary. Numbers 5:2. That a Kohen who is unclean shall not enter the courtyard. Numbers 5:2-3. This refers to the camp of the Shekinah. That the Kohen shall bless Israel. Numbers 6:23. To set a portion of the dough for the Kohen. Numbers 15:20. That the Levites shall not accompany themselves with the service that belongs to the Kohenium, nor the Kohen with that belonging to the Levites. Numbers 18:3. That one not a descendant of Aaron in the male line shall not serve in the sanctuary. Numbers 18:4-7. That the Levites shall serve in the sanctuary. Numbers 18:23. To give the Levites cities to dwell in, these to serve also as cities of refuge. Numbers 35:2. That none of the tribe of Levi shall take any portion of territory in the land of Israel. Deuteronomy 18:1. That none of the tribe of Levi shall take any share of spoil at the conquest of the promised land. Deuteronomy 18:1. That the Kohen shall serve in the sanctuary in divisions, but on festivals they all serve together. Deuteronomy 18:6-8. Truma, tithes, and taxes. That an uncircumcised person shall not eat of the truma, heave offering, and the same applies to other holy things. This rule is inferred from the law of the Paschal, might be also referred to as the Paschal offering by similarity of phrase. Exodus 12:44-45 and Leviticus 22:10. But it is not explicitly set forth in Torah. Traditionally, it has been learned that the rule that the uncircumcised must not eat holy things is an essential principle of the Torah and not an enactment of the scribes. Not to alter the order of separating the truma and the tithes, the separation be in the order of first fruits at the beginning, then the truma, then the first tithe, and at last the second tithe. Exodus 22:28. To give half a shekel every year to the sanctuary for provision of the public sacrifices. Exodus 30:13. That a Kohen who is unclean shall not eat of the truma. Leviticus 22:3-4. That a person who is not a Kohen or the wife of an unmarried daughter of a Kohen shall not eat of the truma. Leviticus 22:10. That a sojourner with a Kohen or his hired servant shall not eat of the truma. Leviticus 22:10. Not to eat tevel, something from which the truma and tithe have not yet been separated. Leviticus 22:15. To set apart the tithe of the produce, 1/10 of the produce after taking out truma for the Levites. Leviticus 27:30, Numbers 18:24. The tithe cattle, Leviticus 27:32. Not to sell the tithe of the herd. Leviticus 27:32-33. That the Levites shall set apart 1/10 of the tithes which has yet received from Israelites and give it to the Kohenium, called the truma of the tithe. Numbers 18:26. Not to eat the second tithe of cereals outside Jerusalem. Deuteronomy 12:17. Not to consume the second tithe of the vintage outside Jerusalem. Deuteronomy 12:17. Not to consume the second tithe of the oil outside Jerusalem. Deuteronomy 12:17. Not to forsake the Levites. Deuteronomy 12:19. But their gifts, dues, should be given to them so that they might rejoice therewith on each and every festival. Reference Levi. To set apart the second tithe in the first, second, fourth, and fifth years of the sabbatical cycle to be eaten by its owner in Jerusalem. Deuteronomy 14:22. To set apart the second tithe in the third and sixth year of the sabbatical cycle for the poor. Deuteronomy 14:28-29. To give the Kohen the due portions of the carcass of cattle. Deuteronomy 18:3. According to Talmud, this is not mandatory in the present outside of Israel, but is permissible in some observant people to do so. To give the first of the fleece to the Kohen, Deuteronomy 18:4. The set apart Truma, Jidala, the great heave offering, that is a small portion of the grain, wine, and oil. For the Kohen, Deuteronomy 18:4, not to expend the proceeds of the second tithe on anything but food and drink, Deuteronomy 26:14, not to eat the second tithe, even in Jerusalem, in a state of uncleanness until the tithe hath been redeemed, Deuteronomy 26:14, not to eat the second tithe when mourning, Deuteronomy 26:14, to make the declaration when bringing the second tithe to the sanctuary, Deuteronomy 26:13, the temple, the sanctuary, and sacred objects, not to build an altar of hewn stone, Exodus 20:22, not to mount the altar by steps, Exodus 20:23, to build the sanctuary, Exodus 25:8, not to remove the staves from the ark, Exodus 25:15, to set the showbread and the frankincense before the Lord every Shabbat, Exodus 25:30, to kindle lights in the sanctuary, Exodus 27:21, that the breastplate shall not be loosened from the ephod, Exodus 28:28, to offer up incense twice daily, Exodus 37, not to offer strange incense nor any sacrifice upon the golden altar, Exodus 39, that the Kohen shall wash his hands and feet at the time of service, Exodus 30:19, to prepare the oil of anointment and anoint high Kohanim and kings with it, Exodus 30:31, not to compound oil for lay use after the formula of the anointing oil, Exodus 30:32-33, not to anoint a stranger with the anointing oil, Exodus 30:32, not to compound anything after the formula of which incense, Exodus 30:37, that he who in error makes lawful use of sacred things shall make restitution of the value of his trespass and add a fifth, Leviticus 5:16, to remove the ashes from the altar, Leviticus 6:3, to keep fire always burning on the altar of the burnt offering, Leviticus 6:6, not to extinguish the fire on the altar, Leviticus 6:6, that a Kohen shall not enter the sanctuary with disheveled hair, Leviticus 10:6, that a Kohen shall not enter the sanctuary with torn garments, Leviticus 10:6, that the Kohen shall not leave the courtyard of the sanctuary during service, Leviticus 10:7, that an intoxicated person shall not enter the sanctuary nor give decisions in matters of the law, Leviticus 10:9-11, to revere the sanctuary, Leviticus 19:30, that when the ark is carried, it should be carried on the shoulder, Numbers 7:9, to observe the second Passover, Numbers 9:11, to eat the flesh of the paschal lamb on it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs, Numbers 9:11, not to leave any flesh on the paschal lamb brought on the second Passover into the morning, Numbers 9:12, not to break a bone of the paschal. I believe that they're saying paschal, but it might also be paschal. I think it's paschal lamb. Could be wrong. Brought on the second Passover, Numbers 9:12, to sound the trumpets at the offering of sacrifices and in times of trouble, Numbers 10:9-10, to watch over the edifice continually, Numbers 18:2, not to allow the sanctuary to remain unwatched, Numbers 18:5, that an offering shall be brought by one who has in error committed a trespass against sacred things, or robbed or lain carnally with a bondmaid betrothed to a man, or denied what was deposited with him and swore falsely to support his denial. This is called a guilt offering for a known trespass. Not to destroy anything in the sanctuary or synagogues or of houses of study, nor erase holy names of God or any sacred scriptures be destroyed. Deuteronomy 12:2-4. Sacrifices and offerings. To sacrifice the firstling of clean cattle and offer it up, Exodus 13:2, Deuteronomy 15:19. At the present time it is not offered up. To slay the paschal lamb, Exodus 12:6. To eat the flesh of the paschal sacrifice on the night of the 15th of Nisan, Exodus 12:8. Not to eat the flesh of the paschal lamb raw or sodden, Exodus 12:9. Not to leave any portion of the flesh of the paschal sacrifice into the morning unconsumed. Exodus 12:10. Not to give the flesh of the paschal lamb to an Israelite who has become an apostate. Exodus 12:43. Not to give flesh of a paschal lamb to a stranger who lives among you to eat. Exodus 12:45. Not to take any of the flesh of the paschal lamb from the company's place of assembly. Exodus 12:46. Not to break hang on, I gotta find it. Not to break a bone of the paschal lamb. Exodus 12:46. That the uncircumcised shall not eat of the flesh of the paschal lamb. Exodus 12:48. Not to slaughter the paschal lamb while there is a chametz in the house. Exodus 23:18. Exodus 24:25. Not to leave the part of the paschal lamb that should be burnt on the altar until the morning when it is no longer to be fit to be burnt. Exodus 23:18. Exodus 24:25. Not to go up to sanctuary for the festival without bringing an offering. Exodus 23:15. To bring the first fruits of the sanctuary. Exodus 23:19. But the flesh of a sin offering and guilt offering shall be eaten. Exodus 29:33. That one not of the seed of Aaron shall not eat the flesh of the holy sacrifices. Exodus 29:33. To observe the procedure of the burnt offering. Leviticus 1:3. To observe the procedure of the meal offering. Leviticus 2:1. Not to offer up leaven or honey. Leviticus 2:1. That every sacrifice be salted. Leviticus 2:13. Not to offer up any offering unsalted. Leviticus 2:13. That the court of judgment shall offer up a sacrifice if they have erred in a judicial pronouncement. Leviticus 4:13. That an individual shall bring a sin offering if he has sinned in error by committing a transgression, the conscious violation of which is punished with excision. Leviticus 4:27-28. To offer a sacrifice of varying value in accordance with one's means. Leviticus 5:7. Not to sever completely the head of a fowl brought as a sin offering. Leviticus 5:8. Not to put olive oil in a sin offering made of flour. Leviticus 5:11. Not to put frankincense on a sin offering made of flour. Leviticus 5:11. That individual shall bring an offering if he is in doubt as to whether he has committed a sin for which has to bring a sin offering. This is called a guilt offering for doubtful sins. Leviticus 5:17-19. That the remainder of the meal offering shall be eaten. Leviticus 6:9. Not to allow the remainder of the meal offering to become leavened. Leviticus 6:10. That the high Kohen shall offer a meal offering daily. Leviticus 6:13. Not to eat of the meal offering brought by the Kohanim. Leviticus 6:16. To observe the procedure of the sin offering. Leviticus 6:18. Not to eat the flesh of sin offering. Not to eat the flesh of the sin offerings, the blood of which is brought within the sanctuary and sprinkled towards the veil. Leviticus 6:23. To observe the procedure of the guilt offering. Leviticus 7:1. To observe the procedure of the peace offering. Leviticus 7:11. To burn meat of the holy sacrifice that has remained over. Leviticus 7:17. Not to eat of sacrifices that are eaten beyond the appointed time for eating them. Leviticus 7:18. Not to eat of holy things which have become unclean. Leviticus 7:19. Not to burn meat of the holy sacrifice which has become unclean. Leviticus 7:19. That a person who is unclean shall not eat of things that are holy. Leviticus 7:20. A Kohen's daughter who profaned herself shall not eat of the holy things, neither of the heave offering, nor of the breast, nor of the shoulder of peace offerings. Leviticus 10:14. Leviticus 22:12. That a woman after childbirth shall bring an offering when she is clean. Leviticus 12:6. That the leper shall bring a sacrifice after he is cleansed. Leviticus 14:10. That a man having an issue shall bring a sacrifice after he is cleansed of his issue. Leviticus 15:13 through 15. That a woman having an issue shall bring a sacrifice after she is cleansed of her issue, Leviticus 15:28-30. To observe on Yom Kippur the service appointed for that day regarding the sacrifice, confessions, sending away of the scapegoat, Leviticus 16:3-34. Nor to slaughter beasts set apart for sacrifices outside the sanctuary, Leviticus 7:3-4. Not to eat flesh of a sacrifice that has been left over beyond the time appointed for its consumption, Leviticus 19:8. Not to sanctify blemished cattle for sacrifice on the altar, Leviticus 22:20. This text prohibits such beasts being set apart for every sacrifice on the altar. That every animal offered up shall be without blemish, Leviticus 22:21. Not to inflict a blemish on cattle set apart for sacrifice, Leviticus 22:21. Not to slaughter blemished cattle as sacrifices, Leviticus 22:22. Not to burn the limbs of blemished cattle upon the altar, Leviticus 22:22. Not to sprinkle the blood of blemished cattle upon the altar, Leviticus 22:24. Not to offer up a blemished beast that comes from non-Israelites, Leviticus 22:25. That sacrifices of cattle can only take place when they are at least 8 days old, Leviticus 22:27. Not to leave any flesh of the Thanksgiving offering until the morning, Leviticus 22:30. To offer up the meal offering of the Omer on the coming of the first day of Passover together with one lamb, Leviticus 23:10. Not to eat bread made of new grain before the Omer of barley has been offered up on the second day of Passover, Leviticus 23:14. Not to eat roasted grain of the new produce before that time, Leviticus 23:14. Not to eat fresh ears of the new grain before that time, Leviticus 23:14. To bring on Shabbat loaves of bread together with the sacrifices, which are then offered up in connection with the loaves, Leviticus 23:17-20. To offer up an additional sacrifice on Passover, Leviticus 23:36. That when he vows on the Lord the monetary value of a person shall pay the amount appointed in the scriptural portion, Leviticus 27:2-8. If a beast is exchanged for one that has been set apart as an offering, both become sacred, Leviticus 27:10. Not to exchange a beast set aside for sacrifice, Leviticus 27:10. That one who vows to the Lord the monetary value of an unclean beast shall pay its value, Leviticus 27:11-13. That one who vows the value of his house shall pay according to the appraisal of Kohen, Leviticus 27:11-13. That one who sanctifies to the Lord a portion of his field shall pay according to the estimation appointed in the scriptural portion, Leviticus 27:16-24. Not to transfer a beast set apart for sacrifice from which one class of sacrifices to another, Leviticus 27:26. To decide in regard to dedicated property as to which is sacred to the Lord and which belongs to Kohen, Leviticus 27:28. Not to sell a field devoted to the Lord, Leviticus 27:28. Not to redeem a field devoted to the Lord, Leviticus 27:28. Not to make confession before the Lord of any sin that one has committed when bringing a sacrifice and at other times, Numbers 5:6-7. Not to put olive oil in the meal offering of a woman suspected of adultery, Numbers 5:15. Not to put frankincense on it, Numbers 5:15. Not to offer up the regular sacrifices daily, 2 lambs as burnt offerings, Numbers 28:3. To offer up an additional sacrifice every Shabbat, 2 lambs, Numbers 28:9. To offer up additional sacrifices every new moon, Numbers 28:11. To bring an additional offering on Shabbat, Numbers 28:26-27. To offer up an additional sacrifice on Rosh Hashanah, Numbers 21:1-6. To offer up an additional sacrifice on Yom Kippur, Numbers 29:7-8. To offer up an additional sacrifice on Sukkot, might be Sukkot, Numbers 21:12 through 34. To offer up an additional offering on Shemini Atzeret, which is a festival by itself. Numbers 21:35, 38. To bring all offerings, whether obligatory or free will, on the first festival after these were incurred. Deuteronomy 12:5 through 6. Not to offer up sacrifices outside the sanctuary. Deuteronomy 12:13. To offer all sacrifices in the sanctuary. Deuteronomy 12:14. To redeem cattle set apart for sacrifices that contracted disqualifying blemishes, after which they may be eaten by anyone. Deuteronomy 12:15. Not to eat of the unblemished firstling outside Jerusalem. Deuteronomy 12:17. Not to eat the flesh of the burnt offering. Deuteronomy 12:17. That the Kohanim shall not eat the flesh of the sin offering or guilt offering outside the courtyard of the sanctuary. Deuteronomy 12:17. Not to eat of the flesh of the sacrifices that are holy in a minor degree before the blood has been sprinkled. Deuteronomy 12:17. That the Kohen shall not eat the first fruits before they are set down in the courtyard of the sanctuary. Deuteronomy 12:17. To take trouble to bring sacrifices to the sanctuary from places outside the land of Israel. Deuteronomy 12:26. Not to eat the flesh of beasts set apart as sacrifices that have been rendered unfit to be offered up by deliberately inflicted blemish. Deuteronomy 14:3. Not to do work with cattle set apart for sacrifice. Deuteronomy 15:19. Not to shear beasts set apart for sacrifice. Deuteronomy 15:19. Not to leave any portion of the festival offering brought on the 14th of Nisan under the third day. Deuteronomy 16:4. Not to offer up a beast that is a temporary blemish. Deuteronomy 17:1. Not to offer sacrifices out of the hire of a harlot or a piece of a, or a price of a dog. I gotta see this one as okay. Deuteronomy 23:19. To read the portion prescribed on bringing the first fruits. Deuteronomy 26:5 through 10. Ritual, purity, and impurity. The 8 species of creeping things defiled by contact. Leviticus 11:29-30. That foods become defiled by contact with unclean things. Leviticus 11:34. That anyone who touches the carcass of a beast that died of itself shall be unclean. Leviticus 11:39. That a lying woman is unclean like a menstruating woman in terms of uncleanness. Leviticus 12:2 through 5. That a leper is unclean and defiles. Leviticus 13:2 through 46. That the leper shall be universally recognized as such by the prescribed marks. So too all other unclean persons should declare themselves as such. Leviticus 13:45. That a leprous garment is unclean and defiles. Leviticus 13:47-49. That a leprous house defiles. Leviticus 14:34-46. That a man having a running issue defiles. Leviticus 15:1 through 15. That the seed of copulation defiles. Leviticus 15:16. That purification from all kinds of defilement shall be effected by immersion in the waters of a mikvah. Leviticus 15:16. That a menstruating woman is unclean and defiles others. Leviticus 15:19-24. That a woman having a running issue defiles. Leviticus 15:25-27. To carry out the ordinance of a red heifer so that its ashes will always be available. Numbers 19:9. That a corpse defiles. Numbers 19:11 through 16. That the waters of separation defile one who is clean and cleanse the unclean from pollution by a dead body. Lepers and leprosy, not to drove off the hair of the scalp. Leviticus 13:33. That the procedure of cleaning leprosy, whether of a man or of a house, takes place with cedar wood, hyssop, scarlet thread, 2 birds, and running water. Leviticus 14:1-7, that the leper shall shave all his hair. Leviticus 14:9, not to pluck out the marks of leprosy. Deuteronomy 24:8, the king, not to curse a ruler that is the king or the head of the college in the land of Israel. Exodus 22:27, to appoint a king. Deuteronomy 17:15, not to appoint as ruler over Israel one who comes from non-Israelites. Deuteronomy 17:15, that the king shall not acquire an excess number of horses. Deuteronomy 17:16, that the king shall not take an excessive number of wives. Deuteronomy 17:17, that he shall not accumulate an excessive quantity of gold and silver. Deuteronomy 17:17, that the king shall write a scroll of the Torah for himself in addition to the one that every person should write, so that he writes 2 scrolls. Deuteronomy 17:18, wars, that those engaged in warfare shall not fear their enemies nor be panic-stricken by them during battle. Deuteronomy 3:22, 7:21, 23, to anoint a special Kohen to speak to the soldiers in a war. Deuteronomy 22, in a permissive war as distinguished from obligatory ones, to observe the procedure prescribed in the Torah. Deuteronomy 20:10, not to keep alive any individual of the 7 Canaanite nations. Deuteronomy 20:16, to exterminate the 7 Canaanite nations from the land of Israel. Deuteronomy 20:17, not to destroy first fruits, wantonly or in warfare. Deuteronomy 20:19-20, to deal with a beautiful woman taken captive in war in the manner prescribed in the Torah. Deuteronomy 21:10-14, not to sell a beautiful woman taken captive in war. Deuteronomy 21:14, not to degrade a beautiful woman taken captive in war to condition of a bondwoman. Deuteronomy 21:14, not to offer peace to the Ammonites and to the Moabites before waging war on them, as should be done to other nations. Deuteronomy 23:7, that anyone who is unclean shall not enter the camp of the Levites. According to the Talmud, this is the present day, which means the Temple Mount. To have a place outside the camp for sanitary purposes. Deuteronomy 23:13, to keep that place sanitary. Deuteronomy 23:14-15, always to remember what Amalek did. Deuteronomy 25:17, that the evil done to us by the Amalek shall not be forgotten. Deuteronomy 25:19, to destroy the seed of Amalek. Deuteronomy 25:19. Copyright 5757-5771. That would be the Jewish the years. So that is 613 Mitzvot commandments. Given with scripture. And from that being said, some scripture to let you reflect on. James 2:10, for whosoever shall keep the whole law and yet offend in one point, he is guilty of all. Galatians 2:16, knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law, but by the faith of Jesus Christ, even when we believed in Jesus Christ, that we might be justified by the faith of Christ and not by the works of the law. For by the works of the law shall no flesh be justified. And Galatians 5:4, Christ is become of no effect unto you, whosoever of you are justified by the law, ye are fallen from grace. So next time you run into those holy rollers, those sinless perfectionists, go over the law with them and see how well they kept it. Use James 2:10 for reference. Thanks be to God, God's grace, God's blessing, much love in Jesus' name, amen.